Since Joel's here, we're just going to let Joel go right ahead. If the Baha'i faith is like the last one in your book, because in the book they went geographically and chronologically, and the Baha'i faith relatively is fairly young, although they've been around a few hundred years.
Started in 1844.
1844, okay. Mm-hmm. So, if y'all will welcome Joel. Joel, you've got our attention.
Okay. Hello. Can I get you to hand some of these out? There's some flyers here if you would like to see it. I guess I should use the microphone. My first name is Joel, and my last name is Smith. Just talking with Ray, I did one of those DNA tests where you swab the inside of your cheek with a Q-tip and mail it in. And I found that what they do is they send you back a map with icons all over the world where your living blood relatives reside. And I've got relatives in central New York, near Palmyra. I know that my family goes back at least to the 1600s. To Albany, New York, where they were fur traders. So one of the questions that I had was whether I'm related to Joseph Smith. And I don't know how to do that, how to find that out yet, but it's a possibility. I live in near Navarre, Mary Esther, and I teach 2 comparative religion classes at UWF in Fort Walton Beach. And this is the schedule for this semester for the afternoon class. It's a survey class where I have different speakers come in. And today we had the First Baptist come in. The first weekend was a Hindu priest, a Jewish rabbi. There's a church in Navarre that thinks that William Branham was a prophet. Next week is Greek Orthodox. I've got some Zen Buddhists coming in. Took me a long time, but I've also actually found some Shia Muslims. There's only 3 families in Fort Walton Beach of Shia Muslims. The Shia is the kind of Islam that's in Iran. So very, very timely. And then the last speaker in this series is a Baha'i. My qualifications for teaching a class like this is that I own and operate an appliance repair business, so I'm not a scholar. This is just my own understanding. One of the items on my bucket list when my wife and I turned 60 years old, we got our scuba diving certification. So this is me on the left and my wife on the right, 80 feet down on the Barrier Reef in Belize, swimming with the sharks. And that's me on the left with a hawksbill turtle, and on the right with a lionfish. And the dive master actually took down a PVC tube full of dead fish, and he's swimming along with his tube, and all these sharks are following him. And he actually put the tube on the bottom of the ocean, and the sharks came and laid on the tube, and then you could go over and pet the sharks. Their skin is very thick and it's very rough. It's just like sandpaper. And then when you get tired of diving on the reef, you can go up into the mountains and climb the Mayan temples. So this is a very large, it's called El Castillo, and it's at a place called Xonantanich. And they have stucco carvings, stucco reliefs on the side of this building that are well over 1,000 years old. This is a close-up of one of the reliefs. I think that's a jaguar figure to the little bit of the left there, but each one of these symbols means something. The U-shaped thing, a little bit to the right there, means spring. So I'm not sure exactly what the glyphs say. Also in Belize, we went to, it's called the ATM cave tour. It's a very rugged cave climb, but you get up way inside there, and there's all this ceremonial Mayan pottery. And so that's a piece of pottery there, and next to it is a Mayan skull. And it's been there for so long that the water dripping down is actually calcium glued it to the floor. So you can't even possibly remove these items without even destroying them. And then across the border in Tikal, Guatemala is one of the ancient powerhouses of Central America. Tikal was one of the greatest and largest of the Mayan cities. Last week in my morning class, I guess I should have told you about the morning class. Morning class, I teach a class called Messianic Prophecies of the World's Great Religions. And it's interesting that each one of the world's religions, the founders, either promised to personally return himself or to send another like himself. So last week I covered Native American and Mayan prophecies, and they're fascinating. And much of it relates to actually what Joseph Smith said. So this is also Tikal. This is another one of the large temples. Each one of these temples is probably close to 20 stories tall. They were built by a race of people about 4'8". They had no metal tools, no beasts of burden, and yet they build buildings like this. And the trees above us were just herds of monkeys. This particular one, I think they're howler monkeys, or it could be spider monkeys. And the toucan there was actually 5 feet away from me in the tree. It was a whole tree full of toucans, so that was just really cool. My son is in the Air Force. He's stationed in Germany. So my wife and I went to Germany last year. And Trier, this is in Trier. Trier was the base of operations of Emperor Constantine. So we're talking 3rd century AD. And so Trier was his headquarters. And this is the ancient city gate. They used to have a wall around the city, and you've got the 4 doorways there. You could shut 2 sets of doors, so even if invaders could break through one set of doors, they could still shoot down at them before they got to the second set of doors. This is just down the street from the city gate. These buildings are hundreds of years old, and they're just beautiful. Because Constantine was the emperor, his mother, you may know the story of Empress Helena, went from Italy to the Holy Land and came back with relics, the true cross, the nails that nailed Jesus to the cross. There are 2 churches in Trier. One claims to have one of the original nails that nailed Jesus to the cross. The other claims to have the jacket that he wore, or the robe that he wore. If you go on the internet, you can actually see these things. This is the Roman Colosseum in Trier, Germany. So this is a place where the gladiators actually fought and died. This is the Cologne Cathedral, one of the oldest and largest, most beautiful cathedrals in Europe. That's my wife there on the right. Stained glass windows, 1,000 years old. The cathedral is just astonishing. All around the perimeter and the inside are these effigies of these famous dead people. So this is one guy who is apparently an archbishop or a bishop or something. This guy was actually a knight, so he's dressed in the clothes of a knight with a sword, and the metal plate at the base there. His last name is Arnsberg, and he died in 1380, I think. So just really interesting. Behind the altar in the Trier Cathedral is this large carved gold box, and they claim that it contains the bones of the 3 wise men. I'm a little bit skeptical of that, but that's what they claim. So one of my hobbies, or 2 of my hobbies, I do a little wood carving. Hello?
It's not loud enough. It may need to be turned up.
Hello? There you go. The symbol of the Baha'i faith is a 9-pointed star. So on the left is just a plaque that I carved. And on the right, I also do stained glass and glass fusing. So on the right is the same star recreated in glass. and fused to a panel. So these are just some of my hobbies. And this is a piece that I did. It's fused glass calligraphy. It's Arabic, and the translation's on the right there. It says, "Oh, high above the praises of the praiser is the unspeakable glory." So it's just a hobby. That's kind of a different angle on the text to show you that the letters are raised.
It almost looks edible.
Yeah, and these are my babies. I've got 3 sons. One of my sons lives in Pensacola. He's a chiropractor. His office is up near West Hospital on University. His name is also Smith. These are my 3 dachshunds. Totally spoiled. I wrote a web page. If you do a search for prophecy-fulfilled in Baha'i, you can find it. But what the web page does is it compares the messianic prophecies of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jewish, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, Zoroastrian, Native American, and there's also a section there on Mormon. In my class this morning, one of the women came up to me afterwards and asked me if I'd do a class on Mormon prophecies. And I told her, sure, I've already got the presentation, so I don't know if you'd want to see it, but I've got it with me. So if you want to see the relationship of the prophecies of Joseph Smith to the Baha'i faith, there's a pretty amazing connection. So this is the cover of the workbook that you have, and the index, the great monotheistic religions. They were very kind enough to include Baha'i in the list. So Baha'i is a Abrahamic religion. The founder is related to Abraham. He was royalty. So the Baha'i founder's name is Baha'u'llah, which is a name that means the glory of God. He was royalty. His family line can be traced back to the kings of ancient Persia. And because of his association with the kings of ancient Persia, his family line can also be traced back to King David. So it's pretty fascinating stuff. So through David, he's also related to Abraham. And as you know, that Abraham established a covenant that through his family line, the world would be blessed, and that his descendants would be as numerous as the stars. I guess that's not in real good focus. That's better. These are some of the Baha'i buildings. We're not real big on buildings, but these are some of the buildings all over the world. The one in the upper right is near New Delhi in India. It actually outdraws the Taj Mahal now. It's one of the most famous sites in India. The one on the top, second from the left, is in Wilmette, Illinois. So that's one. Wilmette, Illinois, just north of Chicago, right on the lake. The others are in Germany, Africa, Panama, Samoa. The one on the top left, they're building in Chile. The basic Baha'i teaching, as the card says, is that there is one light and many lamps, that the same one God who spoke to the prophets, it was the same voice that spoke through all of them. So the same voice that spoke to Abraham also spoke to Moses, also spoke to all the Hebrew prophets, also spoke to Jesus. And Baha'is believe that the same voice also spoke through Baha'u'llah. One Baha'i teaching is the essence of all the prophets of God is one and the same. The basic teachings include things like the oneness of God, that there's only one God. There's the oneness of religion, that even though they appear to be separate and distinct, they're actually interconnected. the oneness of mankind, which means if you're human, you deserve the same rights and privileges and dignities as anyone else, which I'm aware that that's the same teaching that this church has. Strong emphasis on peace and justice. The equality of men and women. Harmony of science and religion, that true religion is in agreement with science. We believe in a thing called progressive revelation, that there's been a whole sequence of prophets. This is essentially what the Apostle Paul said at the beginning of the book of Hebrews, that God at many times in many different ways has spoken to humanity through the prophets, and that now he's spoken to humanity through Jesus, is what Paul said. In my comparative religion class, in the morning class, the Messianic Prophecies class, one of the things I do is I give people quizzes. And one of the quizzes is the one on the bottom right of the Golden Rule. Each one of the world's religions has the concept of a Golden Rule, to treat others as you would have them treat you. And so Judaism, Jainism, Zoroastrian, Native American, Christianity, Buddhist, Hindu, Islamic, they all have the Golden Rule. All the religions also teach that that their founder is the way to God, that their founder is the way to attain salvation, that just about any Christian concept you can find in all the other religions. So what I do in my presentations is I'll put a quote up on the board, up on the screen, and I'll read it to them, and I'll ask them to identify what religion this is from. And usually they can't guess. So a quote that they may think would be Christian would actually be Buddhist. So I guess the point is, if the founders actually all taught the exact same things, why is there disunity? Why is there disharmony? Why are people treated poorly? Because they really shouldn't be. And I guess that's... As I said in the morning class, it's titled Messianic Prophecies of the World's Great Religions. And what I teach in this class is that each of the world's major religions contain Messianic prophecies. Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, the Zoroastrian religion, and even the Native American religions all foretell the coming of a promised one. Each of the founders of these great religions either promised to personally return himself, to send another like himself, or in some instances they promise to do both. Christians await the return of Christ and the coming of another comforter. Jewish scriptures foretell the coming of another prophet like Moses and the return of Elijah. Many Muslims, Islamic people, await the appearance of Mahdi and Masih. Masih is Messiah. Krishna promised to personally return from age to age in the Bhagavad Gita. Buddha said that he was not the first Buddha to appear, and that another supremely enlightened Buddha was still yet to come. Some groups of Buddhists refer to a fifth Buddha, that Gautama Buddha was the fourth Buddha, and that there is still one more to come, a fifth. Zoroastrian prophecies foretell the coming of a world renovator. Does everybody know about Zoroaster? No? Okay. Zoroaster was a monotheistic prophet who appeared in Persia, which is modern-day Iran, about 1000 BC. And no one really listened to Zoroaster much about the first 10 years that he taught, and then he succeeded in converting one of the kings. Gradually, the Persian Empire was converted to the Zoroastrian religion, and there was a time when it was one of the largest religions on earth. So when the Jews were taken captive into Babylon and the Persians conquered Babylon in the writing on the wall story from the book of Daniel, what the Persians did is they sent the Jews back home. They sent the Jewish slaves back to Israel. And it was the Persians who paid for the rebuilding of the wall in Jerusalem, and it was the Persian Zoroastrians who paid for the temple, the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. So after Islam conquered the region, although Zoroastrians were supposed to have been people of the book, they were eventually very poorly treated, and they fled. They left. They left Iran, and many of them went to India, and today they're known as Parsi, which is a form of the word Persian. And so the Zoroastrians are known for right thought, right speech, and right actions. One of the interesting things about the Zoroastrians is that Zoroaster spoke of a 12,000-year cycle, broke it up into 4 parts, so 4 parts of 3,000 years each. He said that he had appeared at the beginning of the 4th cycle, and he said that in the next 3,000 years, 3 prophets would come, 3 saviors would come. So about 1,000 years after Zoroaster, the first one came, and his name was Jesus. One of the interesting stories about the Zoroastrians is that when the Magi came to see the infant Jesus, they were probably Zoroastrian priests. And speculation is that they came, actually it was a rescue mission. They realized that the child was going to be in danger, and they came to rescue him. They brought him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, each one symbolizing either a priestly vocation, a kingly vocation, or a healing vocation. But the interesting thing is that one of the gifts that the Zoroastrians, or that the Magi brought to the parents of Jesus, was gold. And very shortly after that, this poor carpenter's family was able to afford a trip into Egypt to save Jesus' life. I've been corresponding with a Zoroastrian in Tampa. Apparently, Tampa is about the nearest that any Zoroastrians live. He's familiar with the story. And I asked him about whether it might be a rescue mission, and he said he actually hadn't heard that one before, but it's very likely. So that was Zoroaster. A little bit of a side trip there. There's many Native American prophecies foretell the coming of a bearded white man from the east who will bring teachings to restore the hoop of unity. The Indians have a concept that the medicine wheel has 4 cardinal colors: black, yellow, red, and white, symbolic of the 4 races of men. They have a teaching that the 4 races of men will come back together on the North American continent at just about the same time in history. And that happened. We had the Native Americans were already here, the red race. The black race was brought over as slaves and laborers. The yellow race came over to work on the railroads. And of course the white race. Each one of these races, they speak of the hoop of this race. What the prophecies are foretelling is a time will come when the hoops will come together. The hoop of many hoops the hoops will come together as the hoop of many hoops come together as one. This is essentially what the message of the religions is, that the time will come when we will all come together as one family. So each religion in its own way has foretold the coming of a great religion-restoring, world-uniting, peace-bringing Messiah. What the Baha'i viewpoint would be is that they're not mutually exclusive. It's all part of the same process, that God has sent prophets to every country and every culture on the earth to teach them how to live lives that are beneficial to themselves and to humanity. And that one day, as the book of Daniel says, there will be a great explosion of knowledge, and it will actually be possible for us to come together as one family. Or at the end of Isaiah, it says that all nations and tongues will be brought together to worship before the Lord. This is the story, this is the theme of the holy books. This is the theme of the book of Daniel. This is the theme of the book of Revelation. Had a lady in one of my classes ask whether everybody, if the other religions teach that everybody's just going to fly away to some other planet or someplace else, and when the world is destroyed. I said, well, none of them really say the world's going to be destroyed. The book of Revelation speaks of a time when all things will be made new. The book of Daniel talks about the succession of the empires, at which time the kingdom of God comes. And the kingdom of God is brought by two personages. And it was two personages who spoke to Joseph Smith in the Grove when he was a teenager. So for centuries, people from all over the world have been hoping and praying that they will be the generation which will witness the coming of their promised one. And not many have considered the possibility that they all might be foretelling the exact same event. Now, the main premise of my presentation is to show that God is systematic, progressive, and periodic in revealing His will to humankind through men we call messengers or prophets or manifestations of God. Some of the founders of the world's major world religions are manifestations of God, are well known, others are not. The usual list of well-known prophets includes Krishna, Buddha, Zoroaster, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and Baha'u'llah. Others include people like Joseph, Noah, Hud, Saleh, and the Bab. The Bab is the forerunner. Each one of the prophets, when he appears, they appear in twos, and they all have forerunners. So the forerunner of Baha'u'llah was a man who assumed the title of the Bab, or the Gate. There's also the religion of the Sabaeans, and no one even knows who he was, but it was a very ancient religion in the Fertile Crescent area. And I'm certain that people in this room would probably include Joseph Smith in that list. So the Apostle Paul explained this process of how God communicates with humanity from age to age. And Paul said, in the past, God spoke to our forefathers through many prophets at many times and in various ways, but in these last days has spoken to us by His Son, Jesus. So Paul pretty much just states the obvious there. I did an internet search one time where I typed in how many prophets appeared in the Bible, and the answer came back about 50. So this is what Paul's describing here. Obviously, there are major prophets and there are minor prophets. There's the still, calm, still voice, and then there's the kind like Jesus was, where the voice dwelled in Him and spoke through Him, is what Jesus said. So each individual manifestation relays God's spiritual and social teachings to humanity, and each manifestation founds a religion. Each messenger establishes a covenant concerning the coming of the next manifestation, who will appear after himself at a time in the future. This process of revelation has always existed and will always exist. It is a process that will never cease. So viewed this way, we can see that the religions founded by the various manifestations of God are an evolutionary process. That each manifestation of God brings a larger measure of revelation and understanding to humankind than the previous one. That each one builds on the previous. The differences in the messages brought by the manifestations can be attributed to the various social and human needs, the conditions and varying requirements of the age and the spiritual capacity of humanity at that time in history. These differences are seen to be needed to serve the needs of a society that has progressively evolved through higher and higher stages of unity, from family to tribes to nation, and we're at the point right now where the next stage is world unity. The manifestations of God have each proclaimed the exact same eternal, moral, and spiritual truths, and these are the truths that do not change. This is the aspect of each one of their revelations that do not change. Each time a prophet appears, he enunciates the same qualities, things like the Golden Rule. And it's these teachings that are renewed from age to age. At the same time, there's also social teachings that are unique. They're modified and discarded to meet the social needs of humanity at that stage in its development. Social teachings may include such things as laws of conduct, diet, institutions, ceremonies, prayer, these kind of things. These may change significantly from manifestation to manifestation. Another reason for the differences is human interpretation and human encroachment, human invention. There are things that people do that there's no reason for doing them, but they do them anyway, and after a while it becomes just the way they do it, just the way they act. So religion can be compared to grades in a school. Concepts which may have been appropriate to teach in primary school would be quite inappropriate in high school or college. It is not necessary to suggest that early beliefs are wrong, since the larger process is recognized, and we can see that they were necessary steps to promote the social growth of humanity at the time. Spiritual teachings are universal and don't change. Spiritual teachings include things like the Golden Rule. Thus, the spiritual aspect of the message is universal and does not change, while the social teachings can be changed and are seen to be relative and not absolute. So this accounts for the differences between Old Testament religion and New Testament religion. It's the same religion brought to humanity through the same one God, but they're significantly different. But humanity had advanced to the point where it was time to raise the Jewish teachings to the level of spiritual metaphor. You keep the lesson of the law, but you don't necessarily have to do the law anymore. So this viewpoint can help to resolve many of the apparent conflicts between the differing theologies of the world. Each religion may have had truth explained differently according to the needs and recipients of the teaching. Viewed this way, we can see that religion is a progressively unfolding process. So the manifestation of God is seen as restoring the essential truths of religion and returning the faithful to the correct practice. At the same time, the manifestation eliminates redundant or corrupt social practices and creates social structures that will support the betterment of mankind. This is a quote from the Baha'i writings. The creator of all is one God. From the same God, all creation sprang into existence, and he is the one goal towards which everything in nature yearns. There can be no doubt whatever that the peoples of the world of whatever race or religion derive their inspiration from one heavenly source and are the subjects of one God. The difference between the ordinances under which they abide should be attributed to the varying requirements and exigencies of the age in which they were revealed. Arise, and armed with the power of faith, shatter to pieces the gods of your vain imaginings, the sowers of dissension amongst you. Cleave unto that which draweth you together and uniteth you. The diversity in the human family should be the cause. Diversity should be the cause of love and harmony. So differences should be the cause of unity, is what they're saying. As it is in music, where many different notes blend together in the making of a perfect chord. If you are of a different race and color from yourself, do not mistrust them and withdraw yourself into your shell of conventionality, but rather be glad and show them kindness. Think of them as different colored roses growing in the beautiful garden of humanity, and rejoice to be among them. Likewise, when you meet those whose opinions differ from your own, do not turn away your face from them. All are seeking truth, and there are many roads leading there too. Truth has many aspects, but it remains always and forever one. Do not allow differences of opinion or diversity of thought to separate you from your fellow men, or to be the cause of dispute, hatred, and strife in your hearts. Rather, search diligently for the truth and make all men your friends. There is one God. Mankind is one. The foundations of religion are one. Let us worship him and give praise for all his great prophets and messengers who have manifested his brightness and glory. We offer thanksgiving unto God in all circumstances and cherish the hope that he, exalted be his glory, may through his gracious providence guide all who dwell on earth towards that which is acceptable and pleasing unto him. Any questions or comments? I think it's probably pretty much already what you already believe, much of it.
Is that material you're showing in here? I haven't had chance.
In a different form, yes.
I thought what you presented is beautiful. How can we get a copy of it?
Speak up, Bill.
He wants a copy of it. So, yes. Well, there's one place to get it. This is a web page that I wrote. It's had in the neighborhood of, I don't know, 2 to 3 million hits. So there's a lot of interest in this kind of thing in the world. I've got a lot of videos on the internet, on YouTube, dozens of videos, and right now I think I've got about 375,000 viewings on those kind of things. It is my plan to begin to get these kind of presentations down on video and get them on the internet. As I said, this is a class that I teach, and the class is 8 weeks long, and each class is an hour and a half long. So I literally have 12, 15 hours worth of material just right here. So one of the interesting things about Baha'u'llah is that he claims to be the one who is foretold in the book of Daniel, the book of Revelation, the book of Isaiah, these kind of books. So I could tell you these kind of stories if you like, or I can go wherever you want to go. As I said, I've got a commentary on Mormon prophecies. So
That would be interesting, how the faiths connect, Mormonism.
Okay. How much longer do I have?
About 30.
30 minutes? Okay.
Did you say that this is the second largest religion in the world?
In Iran, it's the second most widespread religion. And I don't know, I don't pay much attention to those kind of statistics, but I know that in the city of Tehran, supposedly there are 100,000 Baha'is, which right now the Baha'is in Iran are extremely persecuted, extremely suppressed. So when Ayatollah Khomeini came back from exile in France, he had two stated objectives. One is to oust the Shah, and the other is to destroy the Baha'is. The Muslims do not like the idea that another prophet would appear after Muhammad. Nevertheless, in the early years, when the forerunner appeared, his name is the Bab, which means the gate, his inner circle of followers were primarily clergymen. So these were the intellectuals. That's the first time in history that's happened. And there was a time when the king sent the greatest theologian in the country to go interview him. And his name was Yahya, which is Persian for John. And so Yahya told the king, I will either bring his head back on a stake, or I will, if he's real, I will follow him. And the story, in the span of 3 interviews, the greatest theologian in the country was so overwhelmed by the forerunner, the Bab, that he sent a letter back to the king and said, he's real. He really is. Trying to think which way to go with this. We've already done much of this. I guess I'll tell you a little bit about Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah was born in 1817 in Tehran, Persia, in Iran, with today's Iran. As I said previously, he's a direct descendant of Abraham. He's a direct descendant of King David. He was not educated. His knowledge was innate. At the youngest age, he could solve the most complex problems and the most complex explanations. So Joseph Smith was born 1805. Is that correct? Yes.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. So Baha'u'llah was nobility. He was offered a high position. His father was a advisor in the court of the king. He was offered the position. He refused it. Instead, he dedicated his time to helping the oppressed, the sick, and the poor, and championing the cause of justice. Baha'u'llah's sufferings began when he arose to start to teach. He lived in exile, imprisonment, and persecution. He was put in chains in a dark and dismal dungeon in Tehran. And this was actually all foretold in Isaiah and in the book of Revelation. And I can go into more detail if you like. So this is a map of Baha'u'llah's exiles. Was it the 17th chapter of the book of Revelation? It speaks to the coming of the royal ones from the east, coming to Israel from the east. Isaiah speaks repeatedly of the coming of the Redeemer from the east. So, right there is Israel. So his homeland was to the east. 17th chapter of the book of Revelation says that he will come to the Tigris and Euphrates. It actually starts out by saying he'll come from the land of the sun. And Persia was the symbol of Persia on the flag was the sun. Right here is the Tigris and Euphrates, as the book of Revelation said. Then it says the seat of the beast. One of the beasts was right here in Ashur. This is the capital of the Assyrian Empire. Up here, it was the capital of Turkey. This is where the Sultan of Turkey lived. It was the Sultan who put Baha'u'llah in prison. So it's referred to as the seat of the beast in the book of Revelation. And then he comes here to Mount Carmel. And in the 17th chapter, it refers to the 7 plagues, the last 7 plagues. In the original Greek, the word that is translated as plague can actually be translated as indignity. So the 6th of the 7 is the Armageddon. So Armageddon, the city of Megiddo, well, it's right there. So the Har Megiddon literally means the mountain of Megiddo. Megiddo is the pass. And so the mountain of Megiddo is Mount Carmel. Isaiah speaks of the Redeemer coming to Sharon, Akka, and Mount Carmel. So he quite literally did that. The timetable in books like the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation, I could probably take an entire hour to explain these to you, and I do it in my class. I explain the numbers. But just briefly, I think it's in the 9th chapter of the book of Daniel, it speaks of the 70-week prophecy. And what it says is 70 weeks are appointed from the date of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, then shall Messiah be cut off. This is in the book of Daniel. Are you familiar with this one? Okay. 2 places in Ezekiel and Numbers, it says that days can equal years in prophecy. So if you take the 70 weeks from, and this is the prophecy that Jesus referred to in Matthew 24, by the way, when you see the abomination of desolation foretold by Daniel the prophet. Get ready. So the 70-week prophecy, if you figure out how many days are in 70 weeks, it's 490 days. So what Daniel says is from the 70 weeks are appointed from the date of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, then shall Messiah be cut off. The date of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem was given by a Persian king named Artaxerxes. This is in 457 BC. So if you take 490 years, add it to 457 BC, count forward 490 years, it says that the Messiah should be cut off about the year 33 AD. This is in the book of Daniel. Any ideas who that might have referred to? So it was Jesus. Daniel speaks of the rise and fall of the empires, culminating in the coming of the kingdom of God. So when Jesus was asked, what should we pray for? He said, pray for the coming of my Father's kingdom. And this is what the book of Daniel is about. In the 12th chapter, the last chapter of the book of Daniel, it speaks of a time, times and a half. It actually refers to the same number twice in the book of Daniel. If you go to the book of Revelation, in the 11th, 12th, and 13th chapters, the same number appears 7 different times. It appears as 3.5 years, 3.5 times, 42 months, 1,260 days. And these are all different ways of just explaining the exact same number. So there are 1,260 days in 42 months, 42 times 12. 1260. There are 1,260 days in 3.5 years, 3.5 times. In the Islamic religion, the time for the coming of the Islamic Messiah is the year 1260 of their calendar. Interesting, huh? So the Jewish, Christian, and Islamic prophecies all point to the year 1260. And the imagery in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation tells the story of of the coming of the woman clothed with the sun, with the moon below her feet, which just happens to be the moon and the stars, the symbol of Islam. It says that she will give birth to a man-child. She will be opposed by this beast, which is a corrupted form of Islam. She will give birth to the child, and he will be protected for 1,260 days, at which time the man-child comes forth to rule all nations. So that's just, I know that might be a little bit difficult to understand. I do have a presentation where it details it point by point, but it would take me an hour to do it. So the point is, the middle of the 1800s was an extremely significant time. This is the same time that people like William Miller calculated the prophecies, that 1844 was when Christ was supposed to return. And the Seventh-day Adventists, today they're Seventh-day Adventists, refer to this as the Great Disappointment. Actually, Charles Russell, who is the founder of the Jehovah's Witness movement, started out with the 1844 calculations, updated them 30 years to 1874, and said that that's when Christ was going to return. And when that didn't happen, he kept updating it finally to 1914, by the time he was dead. But the point is, there were many movements at this time where people were saying, something important is happening here. One of them was Joseph Smith. So Baha'u'llah was exiled to Akka on the coast in Israel. This is right on the side of Mount Carmel. Isaiah said that the Redeemer would come to Akka, Mount Carmel, and Sharon. The Armageddon is Mount Carmel. The book of Micah refers to the coming of this personage to Mount Carmel. The 52nd chapter of Isaiah speaks of the Redeemer in chains. This is it. And this is what Baha'u'llah wrote. These are all Baha'i sites in Israel. The Bab was the forerunner. He was the herald of the Baha'i faith. The Bab never met Baha'u'llah, but still he gave his life for him. His life has significant parallels to the life of Jesus. He only taught for about 3 years. He was very young. He was irresistible in his argument. And for 6 years he taught, get ready. The promised one that you've been promised for centuries is coming. He had thousands of followers. The government of Iran didn't like this. And this is where he was killed. He was suspended by ropes, and he was shot by a firing squad. One of the interesting stories about this is that they first brought in a regiment to shoot him, to kill him, and the regiment shot 750 rifles, and when the smoke cleared, he was standing there on the ground unharmed. This is even in the official government statements. So the first regiment left, and they had to bring in another regiment, and they finally succeeded in killing him. So in some ways the story is very similar to that story of Jesus. This is Mount Carmel. This is the Armageddon. This is the Baha'i properties of Mount Carmel. This is the Baha'i World Center. Abdu'l-Baha was the oldest son of Baha'u'llah. After Baha'u'llah's passing, Abdu'l-Baha became the leader. Baha'u'llah established a covenant with him to lead the community. And it was Abdu'l-Baha who explained many of the Bible prophecies. He actually, again, is a direct descendant of Abraham. So if you want to know what Abraham looked like, there you go. This is a young picture of Abdu'l-Baha, and he spent 56 years in prison in Akka. He was finally released in the Young Turk Revolution in 1912. He immediately came to the United States. So this is a picture of him posing with a young girl in the United States. This is in Paris. After the passing of Abdu'l-Baha, his grandson became the head of the faith. In the book, it says that Abdu'l-Baha lived to 1957. Actually, Abdu'l-Baha died in 1921. His grandson lived to 1957. And he's called the Guardian. And he interpreted the Baha'i writings for 36 years. So again, this is Mount Carmel in Israel. Isaiah spoke of the nations coming to Mount Carmel. I think I'm running out of time. So would you like me to do the one on the Mormon prophecies? Would you like to see those? I see some heads nodding. Okay. Okay. I'm going to preface this by quoting a famous philosopher. His name was Theodore Geisel, Dr. Seuss. So Dr. Seuss was the originator of characters like the Cat in the Hat and the Grinch Who Stole Christmas and all the other ones. The Lorax was the new movie. Horton Hears a Who. Anyhow, in 1977 in Lake Forest, just north of Chicago, Dr. Seuss gave the commencement address to the graduating class of Lake Forest College. And the entire text of his speech was this. And it's titled, My Uncle Terwilliger on the Art of Eating Popovers. My uncle ordered popovers from the restaurant's bill of fare, and when they were served, he regarded them with a penetrating stare. Then he spoke great words of wisdom as he sat there on that chair. To eat these things, said my uncle, you must exercise great care. You may swallow down what's solid, but you must spit out the air. And as you partake of the world's bill of fare, that's darn good advice to follow. Do a lot of spitting out of hot air and be careful what you swallow. So the reason, and I start some of my classes with this statement because these are my understandings, these are my opinions, and I don't mind disagreement, I don't mind dissent, I don't mind questions, and I certainly hope I won't offend anyone by talking about the Mormon prophecies. But it is fascinating. So I took one of those DNA tests where you swab the inside of your cheek with a Q-tip, and this is the results. That's who I am. This is a map of where my living ancestors are in the United States. If you click on each one of the icons, you can see the person's name. In fact, you can see the names on the right side. And you can actually send them a message, if you can send them a note. So I've got relatives all over England, Netherlands. I know I'm from Germany because where my son is stationed near Luxembourg. It's called the Palatine. That's where my people are from. I've got some down in Spain. And if you look at New York there's some in central New York, some towards Albany. And I guess Ohio's kind of covered up. I've got relatives near Independence, Missouri. and around Utah. And Utah is not a bad word, is it? So in the latter half of the 1800s, Seventh-day Adventists taught that Bible prophecy pointed to 1844. And that's briefly what I talked a little bit about just now. The Christian Scientist Church was founded. Charles Russell updated the 1844 prophecies to 1874, and he's the founder of the Jehovah's Witnesses. At the same time, Joseph Smith founded the Mormon Church. And meanwhile, on the other side of the planet, a prisoner in exile arrived in Akka, Israel, in chains. So this is some pictures of Joseph Smith's experience. In the 12th chapter of the book of Daniel, it says that there are two personages, and they're referred to as Gabriel and Michael. Gabriel is the announcer. So when the angel came to Mary to announce that she was pregnant, that was Gabriel. When the angel appeared to Muhammad in the cave, that was Gabriel. So apparently these are two personages, and I guess it's my opinion, they very possibly could be the same two that are in the end of the book of Daniel. So beginning in 1820, Joseph Smith claimed to have experienced a series of heavenly visions in which he was informed that all existing churches were in error and that the true gospel had been lost. Joseph Smith was also informed that he was to herald the coming of the Son of Man. The term Son of Man comes from the 2nd chapter of Ezekiel. Son of Man who speaks the words of God is what Ezekiel says. To herald the return of the Christ, or the return of all the prophets, actually. Now, the interesting thing about the prophecies given by Joseph Smith is that they foretold the coming of two messianic personages who will appear in rapid succession, one right after the other. The first messianic figure is referred to as one mighty and strong, and is identified in commentaries as an Elijah figure or a forerunner like John the Baptist. The second of the two messianic figures whose coming was foretold in Mormon prophecies is the Son of Man. You know the Doctrine and Covenants. I think this church's version of the Doctrine and Covenants is a little bit different than the Utah version. I know that these statements are in the Utah version. I didn't actually have time to check.
They're the same up until about 1840.
Okay.
1844.
Okay. Well, 1844 is an important year. So 1844 was the year foretold in the prophecies of Daniel and Revelation. So at the beginning of the Doctrine and Covenants in the 1st chapter, search these commandments, for they are true and faithful, and the prophecies and promises which are in them shall all be fulfilled. And that's an actual photograph of the statement. So Joseph Smith was told in a vision that he was to herald the return of Christ. Statements recorded in the Doctrine and Covenants suggest that the promised one, whose coming Joseph Smith had come to herald, was already alive on the earth at the time that he was having these visions. So in 1831, Joseph Smith was told, "I am in your midst, and you cannot see me. But the day soon cometh that you shall see me and know that I am, for the veil of darkness shall soon be rent." In another place he said, "I am in your midst, and I am the good shepherd and the stone of Israel." The stone refers to the stone of Daniel, the stone that comes down and smashes the statue, Nebuchadnezzar's statue. Also in the 2nd chapter of the book of Revelation, it speaks of the white stone with the new name written in it. He that buildeth upon this rock shall never fail, and the day cometh that you shall hear my voice and see me and know that I am. Both of these prophecies were written in 1831, and the suggestion is that the Messiah may have been alive on earth at the very time that these revelations were being received by Joseph Smith. 2,000 years ago, the same scenario unfolded. The Jewish people were awaiting the coming of their Messiah. They couldn't recognize Jesus as the Messiah. He was right in their midst. They couldn't see him. He appeared to a people who were waiting for him, and yet still they rejected him. At the beginning of the Gospel of John, I'm sure you're familiar with this passage, a light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. In Doctrine and Covenants, section 45, Joseph Smith wrote, the time of the Gentiles shall come in, a light shall break forth among them, and they sit in darkness, and it shall be the fullness of my gospel. So he's paraphrasing John. This is the 1844 statement. It shall come to pass that I, Lord God, shall send one mighty and strong, holding the scepter of power in his hand, clothed with life for a covering, whose mouth shall utter words, eternal words, while his bowels shall be a fountain of truth, to set in order the house of God. While that man who was called by God and appointed, that putteth forth his hand to steady the ark of God, shall fall by the shaft of death, like as a tree that is smitten by the vivid shaft of lightning. So Joseph Smith was shot and killed in 1844. This apparently is foretelling his death. And these are actually photographs of these sections. I looked at Wikipedia. There is no consensus on anybody's viewpoint who the mighty and strong was. So from the Baha'i viewpoint, at least let's just phrase it this way, from my viewpoint, and this is where I would encourage you to swallow down what's solid and to spit out the hot air, because this is my understanding. My understanding is that the Elijah figure did appear in 1844. In 1844, a 25-year-old man assumed the title of the Bab, or the Gate. He said that he was a prophet of God. And the Bab wrote, I am one of the sustaining pillars in the primal word of God. Whosoever hath recognized me hath attained all that is good and seemly. And the Bab also stated that he was the forerunner to one even greater that was coming, the Son of Man. And although he never met Baha'u'llah in this passage, the Bab actually gave Baha'u'llah his name. And here he refers to it. He says, well is it with him who fixeth his gaze upon the order of Baha'u'llah and rendereth thanks unto his Lord, for he shall assuredly be made manifest. God hath indeed irrevocably ordained it. So the Bab began to teach in 1844. He was executed in 1850. In 1832, Joseph Smith predicted, the Savior shall appear, and we shall see him as he is. The Father has a body of flesh and bones as tangible as man, the Son also, but the Holy Ghost has not a body, but is a personage of spirit. In other words, the Savior will not be an invisible, intangible spirit. And a white stone is given to each of those who come into the celestial kingdom. Thereon is a new name written, which no man knoweth, save he that receiveth it. And the new name is the key word. These are quotes. So 3 times in the book of Isaiah, Isaiah says that he will come with the new name. 3 times in the book of Revelation, it says that the Christ will come with the new name. And that's the actual. So Doctrine and Covenants 130, this is an important one. This is actually, my opinion, the essence of Joseph Smith's message. I prophesy in the name of the Lord God that the commencement of the difficulties which will cause much bloodshed previous to the coming of the Son of Man will be in South Carolina. It may probably arise through the slave question. Doctrine and Covenants 130. That's in the Utah version. I don't know if it's in yours. So in 1832, Joseph Smith prophesied that the American Civil War, which was be fought over the slave issue, will begin in South Carolina, and that it will arise through the slave question. The Civil War began in South Carolina in 1860. The slave question was crystallized in 1863 when President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation freeing the slaves. And Joseph Smith apparently foretold these events over 30 years before they happened. And this is not even the most important part of the prophecy. Joseph Smith predicted that the coming of the Son of Man would become a reality shortly after the beginning of the American Civil War. Again, my understanding, the Son of Man did come in the year 1863, the same year that Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing the slaves and crystallizing the slave question. It was on April 21st, 1863, that Baha'u'llah first publicly announced to the world that he was the promised one whose coming had been foretold in the prophecies of the world's great religions. And this is a statement from Baha'u'llah. The revelation which from time immemorial hath been acclaimed as the purpose and promise of all the prophets of God and the most cherished desire of his messengers hath now, by virtue of the pervasive will of the Almighty and at his irresistible bidding, been revealed unto men. The advent of such a revelation hath been heralded in all the sacred scriptures. So the one mighty and strong, the forerunner, like John the Baptist, appeared in 1844, the same year that Joseph Smith was shot. He assumed the title of the Bab. He announced that he was the gate through which the promised one would appear, and the Bab heralded the coming of Baha'u'llah, just like John the Baptist heralding the coming of Jesus. Baha'u'llah first publicly announced his mission to humanity in 1863, the year foretold in Mormon prophecy by Joseph Smith. Now, Joseph Smith ends Doctrine and Covenants, section 130, with this statement. I was once praying very earnestly to know the time of the coming of the Son of Man when I heard a voice repeat the following. Joseph, my son, if thou livest until thou art 85 years old, thou shalt see the face of the Son of Man. Therefore, let this suffice, and trouble me no more on this matter. So Joseph Smith was born in 1805. That's the actual photograph. If you live until you're 85 years old, you will see him. You will meet him. So Joseph Smith would have been 85 years old in 1890. In 1890, a steamship from England carrying the first pilgrims from Europe arrived in Israel. And one of these people was Professor E.G. Brown of Cambridge University in England. The question I have is, if he had not been killed in 1844, would Joseph Smith have been on that ship? So Dr. Brown met Baha'u'llah, and this is how he describes him. I'm going to skip the first paragraph. Joseph Smith was told that if he lived to be 85 years old, he would hit the face of the Son of Man. So Professor E.G. Brown said, the face on whom I gazed I can never forget, though I cannot describe it. Those piercing eyes seemed to read one's very soul. Power and authority sat on the ample brow. No need to ask in whose presence I stood, as I bowed myself before one who is the object of devotion and love which kings might envy and emperors sigh for in vain. At this time, Baha'u'llah was a prisoner of the Turkish Empire. And this is what Baha'u'llah said back to him. Praise be to God that thou hast attained. Thou hast come to see a prisoner and an exile. We desire but the good of the world and the happiness of the nations, that they deem us a stir up of strife and sedition, worthy of bondage and banishment. That all nations should become one in faith, and all men as brothers. That the bonds of affection and unity between the sons of men should be strengthened, and that diversity of religion should cease, and differences of race be annulled. What harm is there in this? Yet so it shall be. These fruitless wars, fruitless strifes, these ruinous wars shall pass away, and the most great peace shall come. The peace foretold by Isaiah. Let not a man glory in this, that he loves his country. Let him rather glory in this, that he loves his kind. I'm not going to press the issue. As I said, this is my understanding, and I encourage you to swallow down what's solid, spit out the hot air. I hope no one was offended by this presentation, but this is the two lamps. Thank you. What questions does anyone have? Sure.
In our book, it said something about 9, and I was wondering if there 9 people together form an organization. I was wondering.
Yeah, that's part of the.
If it gets to that number.
It's one less than 10.
Yep.
It's an odd number, so if there's ever a vote, there can never be a tie. There's a number of significances to the number 9. 9-pointed star is the symbol of the Baha'i faith. It's one of the symbols. The Baha'i temples all have 9 sides.
It sounded like the representation and organization was in 9s.
Yeah, there's 9 members on the local assembly. So in Pensacola, there's a local spiritual assembly with 9 members. You know, Navarre, Okaloosa County, the same thing. There's a lot of, it gets into some pretty obscure numerical significances that I don't really understand. In Arabic, the name Baha means, the numerical value of Baha is 9. So I really don't know what that means, but please. Yeah.
What does the word Baha'i mean?
Baha means glory or light or splendor. So the name Baha'u'llah actually means the glory of God. And it was a title given to him by his forerunner, the Bab. Questions? Okay, well, I thank you for the opportunity to speak. I hope it was something remotely like what you were wanting.
Oh, yes.
I guess I'll close by complimenting you and doing classes like this, because there are many churches that would not do this. So I applaud you for doing that. I encourage you to keep doing more of it. The connections between the various prophets and the various religions, to me they're obvious, but
well, you know, so much of the religious world is about condemning the other, as you said at the beginning. And is there any other religion as unique as Baha'i that stresses the revelation of God through all the religions as strongly as y'all do?
It's my understanding that the age we live in now is the age it's referred to in the Bible as the harvest, the coming together. Jesus called it the one flock and the one shepherd. And this is a theme that is in all the religions. So,
well, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you.
If everybody will take a break.
I understand that they will do it for you.
Well, they help you, yes. And
Very interesting. Appreciate it.
May I
Thank
have
you.
one more of those to send to my daughter, if you don't mind? Thank you so much.
Hey, how are you?
She'll like that. Thank you.
okay.
I said, we need to come take your class.
Well, how about if I come here and give the class?
That would be good.
Would you do that?
As I said, I've got at least 15 hours worth of material just on the iPad. So
That's just really nice.
And a lot of this now we can look up on the internet. You said at that website?
yeah,
Okay.
just do a search for prophecy-fulfilled in Baha'i, and there it is. But
I really, really enjoyed it. I could listen to much more.
well, I could do 2 hours just on the Book of Daniel.
I got you related to Joseph.
Well, I hope I am. That, I actually know a man in Portland. He's a professor. His name is David Young, and he's a Baha'i. But he's supposedly related to Brigham Young. So I was thinking maybe we should collaborate on a book. It's Smith and Young. But also, the founder of the modern Baptist movement was John Smith in England. So that was pretty much when the Puritans started. The Puritans decided that the Anglicans didn't go far enough. And that's why they were called Puritans, because they wanted even stricter interpretations. But so John Smith was the founder of the modern Baptist movement, and they actually forced him to flee England and move to Amsterdam. So my speaker in my class today was a Baptist.
What part of New York did you come from?